Very few men go seek to talk about their emotions, their feelings, their fears, their insecurities. We don't typically do it with our male friends. We hide so much of what's going on inside. And because there was this total stranger that I might be talking on the phone, because there wasn't video chats back then, and I could just literally do an emotional dump of talk to some degree, which was really venting and complaining mostly. We human beings want emotional connection and physical connection. In the past, we did that in the container of a commitment. Now we see a significance of casual relationships, situationships, hookups, and friends with benefit. I don't know if that's going to be sustainable or healthy. And this is why I'm such a big proponent of human beings actually doing personal development at this stage of their life so they can have the tools to actually be in a significant relationship with someone who will be there for you during the tough time.
Hey y'all, Josh Tomioni with the Derelict Podcast. Welcome back. We're so glad you're here. Would you do me a favor? It will only take you a couple seconds. Whether you're listening or watching right now, will you head on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button? It really helps us get this message to more and more people that we can help. Greatly appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Hey, Derelicts. Welcome back to another episode of the Derelict Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Tomioni, and we have a guest, Jonathon Aslay, on the call today. And I'm really excited to talk to him. I actually just finished your book, Jonathon, yesterday.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I can see it in the background.
Yeah.
The
audio or written version?
What's that?
Was it the audio or written?
Oh, now you're going to call me out. I specifically worded it that way so I didn't have to say I read your book, but you called me out anyway. Audio.
Okay. No. The reason why is the only reason why I even not called you out is that I'm enjoying audiobooks way more than, I can consume more information that way. So that's kind of the reason why I asked it. So
yeah, I like audiobooks a lot. I've kind of gone back and forth. Like I've had a Kindle for years, but I try to stay away from it because I find that just having an actual book in my hand is really nice.
Yeah.
But the audiobook is nice as well. And what I've been doing a lot lately is both, especially if it's an interactive book like yours, where like I'll listen to it and then I'll get the printed copy. And then as I'm listening, whether I'm in the car or on a walk or wherever I am, I'll just mark it. And then I'll go back to that page of the book and then just kind of like do a deep dive on that section. That's been helpful for me too.
I love, actually, there was a book, where is it here? Grounded Spirituality by Jeff Brown. It's a really thick ass book. And I'm like, I started reading it and I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to get the audio version. And then I was doing both at the same time. And I do believe that there's kind of both, you're hitting those senses of both visual and auditory and kinetic all at the same time. And I feel like in that sense, you can, in many cases grasp it even greater. So, but
for sure. Yeah. I think Jonathon, it's interesting you said that because kind of one of my things that I think would be really cool at some point in the future is to change this podcast to a walking podcast.
Okay.
Where we meet in person, and then we have the kinesthetic of the walking, right? Like we're just going on a walk and doing a little interview, because then you have the visual, you have the audio, you have the kinesthetic, and all engines are firing versus just like sitting here, which, especially as men, like is just torture, right?
Well, I think men have been evolving, though, to some degree, and I think
I'm going to pause you right there. Let's talk about that. I want to introduce you here real quick first. So obviously we just jumped right in, but one of the reasons, just so everyone knows, that I really wanted to have you on the call, Jonathon, is because you've been through some shit, like a lot of us have.
Yeah.
You've been through some major tragedy, some major trauma, some major loss in your life, everything from the loss of a marriage to the loss of a child. And you've made it through all of it and figured out how to, it seems like from my perception of you, you've been able to take a lot of that pain and then used it to not only heal yourself, but heal others. And that comes back to your book about self-love, and which I loved, by the way. I thought the book was fantastic. It's a really easy read, and it's just fluid. It's it's like you tackle a lot of different subjects, and I don't want to say on the surface level because it's deeper than that, but it's not so in depth on each topic that you just get lost and you're like, oh my gosh, what are we even talking about anymore? So I really like the fact that you just kind of hit on a bunch of different things, right? Like you'll hit on meditation, you'll hit on prayer, you'll hit on different things about like, saying I love you to yourself in the mirror, and all these different things that you talk about that either worked for you or didn't work for you. And I really liked that, because to me, it was a good just flavor of a bunch of different things that I could see from a lot of different books, but just like key points of like, oh yeah, this and this and this and this. So that was really great. So maybe let's just start with this. Like what made you write the book? Like we'll get to your story in a moment, but I'm just curious, what made you write the book?
Well, it's interesting because as you were sharing just now your perceptions of it, I was thinking of one of my favorite all-time books is The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
You talk about it several times in the book.
Yeah. And I love the book, but I will tell you, it is so deep, so intense. So like, like you're covered in molasses at the Marianas Trench of depth, kind of thing. And like there have been times where I can only read one page and I'm like, oh, I could spend a year unpacking that. And so when I created my book, I'm like, okay, I'm going to create like a second grade version of Untethered Soul, like for a second grader to read. And that's kind of in the style, that's the way I wrote it. What inspired me originally was
real quick, can I make a comment on that real quick? One of the things I just want to tell you that I love about that, just to give you some affirmation, is that, I've read a lot of those more technical books, let's say, where there's nothing wrong with them and they're fantastic. And it's like one of those things where you said you take a page or two at a time because it's just so deep and meaningful, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes for myself, especially as a recovering over analytical, I can get stuck on one concept and not actually take any action. The thing I like about your book and the way that it's set up is it's very action oriented. It's like, well, try this, try this, try this, try this. And I love that about it.
Well, I appreciate that. By the way, just on a side note, you may want to check out this book. It's called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depended Upon It.
I'm reading it right now, actually.
Okay. And by the way, this is like only 60 pages and there's a lot of white space in the book. So,
that's so fun. That's literally the book I just basically started right after yours.
Yeah.
That's
my book that's even more of like, like second grade.
Yeah, but that looks like the original version though.
Pardon?
Yes. Is that the original version of the book?
This might be the original version. I
think it is, because there's a new version that has that original version.
Okay.
And then it has like a part 2, which is like a manual to the part 1.
Okay.
And then there's a part 3 that's something else. I don't know. I just started part 2. Yeah. So if you really like that book, you may want to check out the other one.
I appreciate that. In fact, I believe to some degree, to piggyback on this conversation, the idea of simplistic way of looking at it, because the concept or just even loving yourself, for argument's sake, can be a really radically hard thing to do, even though cognitively we go, oh, that should be easy. And I believe we all have an emotional 6-year-old inside of us. I'm talking us adults, and especially the older we are, the more crap we have, or more luggage or baggage, or however you want to frame it. Is that we all have a little 6-year-old inside of us that needs a bit of nurturing. And so I wrote it for that 6-year-old versus the analytical adult.
Yeah, I get that. And I think the beautiful thing is that even if you are, like I just, explained about myself, a recovering over analytical, the good news is that we all have that part of us that is that 6-year-old. Yeah. And that 6-year-old still needs to be nurtured, no matter who we are, no matter how tough we are, no matter how old we are, no matter what, right? And so I definitely think that it spoke to my 6-year-old for sure.
Can I say something to that though? Because you know what?
No.
Like, Well, I'm going to anyway.
I knew you would. That's why I said no.
Okay. So I did a blog post and, because I've been criticized of being overthinking, and I'm like, why does that have to be a bad thing? Why does even that notion have to represent something's wrong with you or broken or it's too much? I'm like, I'm grateful for that part of me because actually overthinking is my playground. That's where I love to play. I'm more a sapiosexual in that way. I'm more not an intellectual per se, but to me, I like processing that. So what if I don't take a picture with my finger on the Eiffel Tower and I see the pyramids or whatnot? This is my playground. So why judge as it being something wrong or bad or something like that? And why not own it? And that's an element of self-love, is owning all parts of us. And certainly I do believe we should make time for play and other things. I mean, if you jokingly said recovering, if you're spending all day there, you may want to add a walk, on the beach if you can.
Well, and not to overthink your comment about overthinking.
Yeah.
But just the very comment of saying overthinking, which I did myself, is implying that it's more than what should be true, right? So, there's no definition of overthinking.
Yes, exactly.
Overthinking to me might be different than to you, that might be different to everybody else. So somebody who thinks a lot might say overthinking, and you'd have to get really high on the spectrum to be in that capacity, right? Like, could you imagine Elon Musk saying overthinking? Like if he's saying overthinking, you're at the top of that overthinking spectrum versus some, person that can barely put a sentence together saying overthinking, right? So I love what you said about that. That's really true, because just even the term, so this goes to language. So let me back up for a second, because one of the things I want to make sure we talk about today, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, is to talk about how you went through these tragedies that you went through.
Sure.
And specifically, your marriage and that ending, to be able to give a lot of guys are listening to this that are either divorced or going through divorce, and they need some hope as far as the other side goes. So we'll get into that in a moment.
Okay.
And I think this is an interesting topic that we haven't talked about a whole lot on this podcast before, maybe to speak to the more thinker, analytical people that are listening right now. Okay. Right. And maybe I know for myself, this is maybe where I'll posit this question. For myself, when I was in my marriage, I definitely was a quote overthinker.
Okay.
And I use that term to say that it was more thinking than what was healthy for me.
Okay.
So when I use the term overthinker, it means that I am thinking about something too much instead of just doing it. So for me, overthinking stops me from taking action. So I don't think there's anything wrong with thinking. And in fact, I think quite a bit. And in fact, I have a high intelligence. And in fact, I'm proud of all of those elements of me, because that's self-love. I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I'm knowledgeable, I have a high IQ. So I'm not going to say that any of those things are bad. The analytical part of my brain is actually really helpful for me. Where it hinders me, though, just like every superpower has a kryptonite, where it hinders me, though, is when I get stuck in this pattern of just thinking instead of releasing that and going and doing something. As an example, as of my book is coming out right now.
Okay.
And I started that book 4 years ago.
Okay.
So tell me there wasn't overthinking going on, because really the majority of the book I wrote in the last 6 months. So there was a lot of overthinking there instead of just sitting down and writing the damn book.
There's so much I can comment to that if you're open to some.
I'm definitely open to it, and I want to bring it back to your story as well. Sure. So whenever you want to start introducing some of that, I'm
so when you talk about overthinking, I believe the average human has somewhere between 15 and 60,000 thoughts in a day. And I heard this on a podcast, so don't quote me on this. I didn't fact check it, and I believe 80 to 90% of it are actually repetitive thoughts. It's kind of along the same lines, and 80% of that are more we would categorize as negative or ruminating or worrying or fear than something in the affirmative. So my suspicion is when you were in that space, you had something you were worried about, and you were probably processing and analyzing alternate ways to solve the problem. That's what I think overthinking oftentimes is, putting that in a box. With respects to your book, I suspect...
Would you like to know the stats real quick, just because you asked?
Sure.
Well, you didn't ask. I just chat GPT'd it.
Okay.
So it says 6,000 thoughts a day. And of those, this is fascinating to your point, 80% are repeated.
Yeah.
20%, which means you have 1,000 new thoughts a day. 1,000, that's it. And then you have 5,000 that are just repeating the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again.
Well, and I even suspect of those other 1,000, they're just variations of some other.
I bet they are.
But now I want to double check this, because I really did hear 50 to 60,000. But nonetheless, and the part about your book, I suspect there's an element of perfectionism going in, or there was a worry that why it's 4 years versus a shorter period of time. And I'm not suggesting you're a perfectionist or not, but oftentimes what causes people delay is they want something perfect, or want something, well, I'll go back to perfect. Whereas good is good enough. When I wrote my book, I was like, I just said good is good enough. I didn't tweak it more than a few times. And quite frankly, I have subsequently seen so many errors, so many things I'd like to change.
Well, of course, because there is no perfect
done, like good is good enough. So the impetus for the book, and coming back to my divorce, in 2005, I just had turned 40. I found myself, I'd lost my my then wife wanted a divorce. I lost my high-end corporate job, and I got wiped out in the market crash of 2008, literally all within a couple years span. And I was in an emotional purgatory.
And you were low 40s at this point, you said?
Yeah, I'm in the low 40s at this point. And I'm in emotional purgatory for over a half a decade or longer, quite frankly. And just deal and talk about thoughts. I mean, I was in repetitive thoughts of fear, worry, worry, fear. Whether it's, am I going to have enough to live? Can I afford alimony? Can I do this? Can I do that? I mean, it was just, I was an emotional, I was in the depths of Tartarus at this point, and it was painful emotionally. Now, what was interesting is my drug of choice, and I'll be candid with you. I was doing blow, I was doing cocaine, I was doing alcohol, and I was also doing online dating. Like, that was really a drug of choice. Why I'm bringing this up is communicating.
Wait, let me ask you. Hold on. So what aspect, because there's different aspects of online dating being a drug of choice, what aspect of that? Was it the validation piece? Was it the just see how many women that I can go on dates with piece? Was it just looking at beautiful women's photos piece? Like, what? Can you specify that?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
But
is there one that stands out though?
Yeah,
here's the reason I'm asking, Jonathan, and I talk about this in my book as well, is that for me, my highest, I have plenty of drugs of choices, but my highest one is validation from women. That's the highest for me.
So I'm going to tweak that. For me, it was therapy. So, and what I mean by therapy, what I mean in the therapeutic sense is I was trauma bonding with so many people. So I'm getting validation for my pain. I'm getting validation for where I'm at. They're getting validation for their pain. They're getting validation of where I'm at. And I was using as a substitute for therapy. That's why I want to clarify when I said therapy, I was using as a substitute for therapy. Validation, looking at pictures, all that kind of stuff, just the connection of it. And now what was interesting, why I say it was my drug of choice, was it ended up turning into my vocation along the way, because now professionally I'm a dating and relationship coach. So through my addiction, it turned into my passion.
Beautiful.
Studying human behavior, studying personal development, self-help, spirituality, therapy, all along. What I mean is actual therapy, going to a therapist, was a byproduct of this experience. And so for those first 5 years that I felt like I was in hell, it also was a catalyst for the biggest growth, the most significant growth in my life. And it was through personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy that began building the emotional scaffolding for me to get prepared for my next big, gigantic, whether we call it tragedy, loss, pain, that happened roughly.
Before we get to that, I have a question for you. So when you said, I want you to unpack this a little bit.
Sure.
You're talking about the therapy of social or online dating.
Yeah.
Excuse me. You're talking about the therapy of online dating versus the therapy of therapy.
Yeah.
How would you distinguish the two?
Well,
like in other words, what sort of therapy is happening with online dating versus what sort of therapy is happening with therapy?
Great. And let me, if I didn't properly articulate, the online dating was replacing therapy. And the part about therapy, talk therapy, very few men go seek to talk about their emotions, their feelings, their fears, their insecurities. We don't typically do it with our male friends. We don't typically do it with our family. We hide so much of what's going on inside. And because online dating was this, to some degree, it wasn't anonymous, but there was this total stranger that I might be talking on the phone because there wasn't video chats back then. And I could just literally do an emotional dump of talk therapy to some degree, which was really venting and complaining mostly. But in the same vein that if you do that with a therapist, I was doing this randomly with over the course of years, hundreds of women. Just to get what was inside of me that was, it was so stuffed down. I just wanted to get all this shit out. That's what I mean by therapy, is getting our repressed stuff out. Now, it wasn't in the context of real reflectivity and real objectivity and real psychoanalyzing and real depth, but at least I was getting it out.
Yeah. So what do you think was the difference or the results of that sort of therapy versus actual therapy? Or what do you think you were seeking?
Well, to some degree, I wanted validation, that I wasn't this, terrible human being, the way I was being projected. And my now ex-wife and I get along great. But at that time we were in an adversarial dynamic. And when you feel like you're being attacked, just having someone else to talk to and say, you're not that bad of a guy, was at least somewhat comforting, because I felt worthless already. And keep in mind, losing your high-end corporate job and getting wiped out in the market crash, my identity was pummeled in a short period.
It's very hard to have confidence unless you have a really strong self-confidence during those times.
And so what was interesting was I was doing a lot of serial dating, in the sense that I would get close to someone really quick and then I'd pull away because I didn't want them to see behind the curtain of who I really was and what was really going on. So I just showed that. I like the way Chris Rock calls it, the ambassador of your best self. I just show up as the ambassador of my best self, and then I completely run away. And I'm not proud of that action either. I'm not proud. I didn't ghost, but I did what I called the dysfunctional moonwalk. I would, shortly after I knew someone liked me and there was physical connection, I would start backpedaling with all my, it's not you, it's me kind of stuff. In the most dysfunctional way. And they'd be like, oh, of course you shouldn't be in a relationship. You need time to heal. And then I'd be on the app the next morning trying to meet someone else. It was a dick move on my part. I'll own it. But when you're in this cycle of pain, you don't know how, at that moment in my life, I didn't know what was available to me. So I was just stuck in a cycle.
I relate to you. Yeah, I went through that phase myself. Yeah. They used to call me 3-date Josh because that was the most you would get from me.
Yeah.
Because it was, like I found from my dating experience, and I don't know, maybe this is true, maybe it's not for other people.
Yeah.
But after 3 dates, I could pretty much get any woman like interested in me.
Yeah.
If like, assuming the first date went well, right? If the first date didn't go well, then we just moved on. But assuming it did, after 3 dates, like a woman was just like ready. Like she was just ready to go. And I don't just mean sexually. I just mean like she was in, right? And it took 3 dates on average.
Yeah.
And what I found about myself, which also is a dick move. I love the ghosting moonwalk analogy. It's a great analogy. I didn't do that.
Dysfunctional moonwalk.
Dysfunctional moonwalk. It's even better. I didn't do that. What I actually did is I self-sabotaged because the moment that I saw that she was interested, it was like the game was over to me. Because what I was so insecure, seeking so much validation that I wasn't getting from myself. That the moment I saw like, oh, this woman's on board, she's on the hook, so to speak, like she's validating me, she's ready, then it was like, great, I won. And then I would just leave. And oftentimes I would do it in a way like I very rarely, I don't think, or like very rarely was like a jackass about it, but it was more just like, yeah, I'm done. Like it was like, okay, we got to that point, now just cut it off, move on.
You know what's interesting? So I've studied why that might happen. And to some degree, you know, we were seeking a dopamine hit. We were seeking that validation, that connection, which was dopamine. And the minute the dopamine was released, all of a sudden and this is what I found out. I'm like, I don't know why I don't like this person anymore. Like, I mean, I didn't cognitively know. I just knew I didn't like them anymore. And when I use the phrase like, it's hard to build genuine care in 3 dates. And I was very much the same way, Josh, 3 dates. But I would like, I've got to retreat as soon as possible. So the pendulum had to swing the opposite way because I didn't want to create a false sense of expectation. So it'd be like, I have to disappear. Now I didn't ghost. I did it by like, by the way, I had, just on a separate note, I once had a woman on a second date ask to borrow money from me. And of course I said no, but I thought that's a great way to get rid of somebody. I thought about this later, just as like,
hey, I really enjoyed these couple dates and I really just need
$10,000. I'm struggling. And that's a great way for them to say no. And then they want to run as soon as possible. And then I thought, well, if they give you money, at least you're up,
You know what? At least she was upfront enough to ask for it.
Yeah.
I've had women steal from me before and I fell into it because I was obviously not thinking with this head. I was thinking with the other
exactly.
head. So
but
at least she was upfront about it.
Strategy to get rid of someone. And again, I've grown up a lot since then. I'd like to think I operate, kind of from the 4 agreements and being true to my word and being in integrity matters to me a lot. So I do my best to be genuine, but I wasn't that way for a long period of time because when you're in pain, your sense of empathy can go out the window. And again, I'm not justifying bad behavior. I am so not justifying bad behavior, but I understand why we humans and men get a bad rap in the dating marketplace. And quite frankly, women are equally as bad. It's just a different version of it. And so this is what we're faced with today, particularly from a dating realm, is that it's evolved substantially over the last 50 years. And what I mean to say is up until about 50 or 60 years ago, we typically dated within the tribe we lived in. In other words, and hundreds of years ago, you literally did date within the tribe you lived in. But for the most part, you weren't meeting total strangers. And I think what's that caused us to do is marginalize people to some degree, not see them as people, because online dating has cultivated I'll repeat myself, a marginalized way of connecting with people.
And I'm going to tell you too, from my experience and the guys that I work with and even in my own life, online dating is dramatically different than it was 5 years ago. Forget 50 years ago.
Yeah, well, swipe apps, and I believe Swipe has been around a little bit longer than that, but what that has done...
Oh, no, a lot longer. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying the exact same app has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. Tinder 5 years ago is different than Tinder is today.
And I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and I wonder how much COVID played in that arena. But I do believe we are 2025 right now at the time we're recording this. I really do believe we are on a substantial pivot going to happen soon when it comes to connecting in this way. And
do you think it's going to go from 2/3 of people meeting online, which is about the statistic right now? Do you think that's going to go down?
Sadly,
is that what you mean?
No, I don't think it's going to be that. I think hopefully humans wake up to actually using this tool the way it was to some degree meant to be used. But my hope is humans start really operating with a lot more deeper intentionality, greater awareness, less apathy, less naivety. That's my hope. I don't see it evident yet, but I think people are just burnt out.
Yeah, I agree with you, but that's because online dating sites are filled with validation-seeking whores.
Men and women.
Men and women.
Yeah.
I'm not saying men or women. I'm saying that the majority of the people from my experience, and the majority of those people too say, no, I'm looking for something real. And then what they present to the world, and yes, I'm not saying men are worse than this or women are worse than this. I think we're both equally as bad. And we do it in different ways. Just like with social media, you're not going to see a bunch of guys taking pictures in like sexy Speedos on Instagram. Like that's just not a thing. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but that's not a thing. Whereas like millions of women are doing that all the time. And they're seeking validation for that behavior. They're seeking validation to like, look at my body, tell me how hot I am, tell me that you want to fuck me, all that sort of stuff. Men are doing the exact same thing. They just do it in different ways. They do it by, showing a picture of their abs. They do it by showing a picture of their fancy car, their fancy house, all the hot women that they're hanging out with, right? It's all the same stuff. It's like, I'm not validating myself. I don't know how to do self-love per your book. So therefore, I need other people to love me. So feed me, validate me, love me, and then maybe I can be strong enough to be a human. Oof.
Well, I mean, we could do episode after episode unpacking a variety of different things. I think, quite frankly, we're going through a major evolution of relationships to some degree. And I want to parse this. There's the 20 and 30-year-old demographic that is possibly still in that traditional baby making years period of their life, where the purpose of a relationship is to make babies and raise a family. For the demographic I speak to, which is the over 40, the 50, the 60-year-olds, and even 70-year-olds, what they're confused about is what's the purpose of a relationship? Because when you had that concrete purpose of make babies, raise a family, the purpose of a relationship is people haven't identified what that purpose is, other than companionship, connection, and sex. But what's missing today is a solid commitment towards partnership in many cases. And that because of that ambiguity, we're recycling people over and over again, partially because we human beings are rather broken. It's a dysfunctional group of human beings out in the dating marketplace, men and women alike, and they're just butting up against their wounds and their traumas and their unresolved issues, thinking that the next person, coming back to validation, is going to be the soulmate that's going to fix all their problems. And the evolution we're in right now, I believe, is that we're going to see a recession of relationships substantially. Humans are going to have to learn to enjoy their own company through self-love. And maybe in the next couple generations, we'll be operating in a different level. And we'll still be connected through an online, but hopefully with a lot more awareness and sovereignty than we are currently doing.
So yeah, let's touch on that for a moment. So the demographic that I often speak to and that watches this podcast are 30s, 40s, 50s.
Okay.
Generally speaking,
so
there's definitely people in their 60s and 70s. There's definitely people in their 20s. But let's just pick that demographic, and I want you to specifically speak, if you can, to divorced dads.
Okay.
In that demographic. So we're talking 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
So they're already past, to to your point, they're already past that first stage of relationship. Like
Yeah.
they already have the kids. They already
Yeah.
did the one relationship. It didn't work out. I mean, you're speaking to me because
Yeah.
that's who I am, right? I'm a 41-year-old divorced dad.
Perfect.
So somebody in that range, what are you seeing from them with the guys that you're working with? What are you seeing? Like, let's expand on this a little bit. Like, what is the purpose of them having a relationship? And I guess here's let me just preface the question with this. What I'm finding with a lot of that demographic, which I am in, is that much of that demographic, the guys specifically, and this is true for women as well. I'm just speaking to the guys right now.
Yeah.
The guys are burnt out. They're tired of the scene. They're tired of the dating nonsense. They have a relationship that obviously didn't work out.
Yeah.
Now they have to deal with a co-parent with their child, whether it's a healthy relationship or a toxic relationship, doesn't matter. It's still complicated and difficult, as you know.
Yep.
So they're dealing with all these things. And then on top of that, I don't want to make this whole podcast about this, but you have a lot of laws that are in favor of women still through divorce.
Yeah.
So men are like, well, why would I get married again? Why would I go through a chance that now is my second marriage, which the odds of divorce are like 70% now, not 50%. My second marriage, they're like the divorce stats are like 70%.
Yep.
So I have a 3 out of 4 chance basically that this marriage isn't going to work. And then when it doesn't work, she's going to take 70% of my stuff. Okay. It's not 50% anymore. It's usually around 70%. And then I might have all these other issues. Okay. What's the point of even looking for a long-term relationship? Like there just seems to be a big group of guys right now that are just not even seeing the point. Like what is the point of them besides I'm lonely and I would like to have somebody around, but you could get that through dating, even though it's not as intense or deep. But I'm just curious, like what are you seeing in that space right now?
God, I mean, we could do a dozen episodes on this. So let me try to start with what's their motivation for relationship? And I mean, then first off, I would ask myself, what does a relationship mean to me? What does it look like for me? What does commitment mean to me? What does it look like? I'd want those questions answered. Well, I'm inviting men and men and women to ask those questions of themselves, because here's the thing. We traditionally used to be, if you wanted to get laid, you had to get married. So, since we men biologically want to get laid, I'm going to be blunt and say this, our motivation is oftentimes a physical connection with someone. And we believe chemistry equals relationship success. Well, if you've been around the block enough to know that chemistry does not equal relationship success. That's why you got divorced with the first person, because you weren't compatible with one another, but you thought they were hot and they thought you were, charming or whatever it was. And you went down the chemical bandwagon without determining your emotional maturity, your values, your lifestyle compatibility.
And to your point, real quick, I just looked up another stat because I was curious just while we're having this conversation. In 1950, U.S. adults over 18, almost 80%, 78%, almost 80% were married. 80%. Now, it looks like the most recent data is from 2023, a couple years ago, less than 50%, just under 50%.
18-year-olds.
18 plus,
oh,
any adult.
Okay, got it. Oh, sorry. I thought it was 18.
No.
Okay.
Any adult, 18 plus.
Yeah.
Used to be 80%. Now it's less than 50%.
Yeah. So, and to the extent that the challenge might be around marriage is a contract with the government, honestly. And you don't learn that until you go through a divorce.
Yeah, it's true. But let's focus. I think I want to make sure we stay focused here, because I want to focus less on marriage per se. Yeah. I don't want to do a whole podcast on that right now. I mean more, why are people just opting out of long-term relationships in general? What is it about this guy that's the 30s, 40s, 50s that like wants this relationship but just seeis to be opting out? What are you saying?
Well, he's opting out because he has a bias already based on his past experience. That's one reason. I mean, that is a reason why a lot of people opt out of at least the contemplation of marriage. But the idea of marriage was also, look, we're going to take care of each other. And nowadays it's like, look, I don't know if I want to take care of you, and I don't know if I want you to take care of me, but I want companionship. I want connection. I want sex, but I want it without commitment. I want it without that agreement. The challenge with that is, who's going to be there for you when you're going through tough times? Because guess what? You just simply said, hey, I only want a part-time casual relationship. And the minute it gets tough, I'm just going to bolt. That's one of the differences that back when my parents got married, it's like, look, you were in it for life and you're going to stick it out the good times and the bad times. That's why the wedding vows were designed that way, is to make an agreement with one another. It's because if we're so hyper focused on good, and coming back to what you talked about earlier, if we're focused on validation and dopamine hit, and the minute it unravels a little bit, oh, I'm on to the next person, you're not building emotional resiliency. You're not building any emotional muscles. You're not building good communication skills and conflict resolution skills, which is all part of the process of a healthy relationship. You know, at minimum these days, and by the way, coming back to your stats on second and third marriages ending at a 65 to 75% rate, you know, a prenup can solve a lot of those issues if you're worried about that. But here's the thing, Josh.
But by the way, have you ever looked up stats? I'm not going to do it right now because I've already stat filled too much on this episode. But have you looked up stats on people that do a prenup that stay married versus ones that don't?
Oh, that would be really interesting.
The percentage is fascinating because guess what? Most of the people that create a prenup stay married.
You know why? Okay, this is a great conversation to dovetail from, because what do? Is you spend time evaluating the merits of a relationship, and you make agreements with one another. It has
nothing to do with the document. I 100% agree.
It's about having a real conversation instead of just, and by the way, when I see weddings where they spend $50,000, $100,000, especially a couple who only makes that amount combined, I'm like, you're spending more money on the fantasy and the party instead of really the depths of what what you're hopefully doing together. But coming back to the 41-year-old,
why not go travel the world by yourselves and experience cultures and create an amazing relationship? You could do the same thing for less money than you spent on the wedding.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. Or you could put a down payment on a house.
Yeah, for sure.
And then don't get me started on the rings, but nonetheless.
Or actually, you could buy a house depending on the part of the country. I mean, not where I live, but in some parts of the country, you could.
Yeah. So coming back to the 41-year-old divorced, got a couple kids. You know, obviously we human beings want companionship. We want connection. We want physical, sex. And I'm putting that connection, sex, emotional connection and physical connection with someone. In the past, we did that in the container of a commitment. Now we don't have to have much of a commitment. But what it's caused is we see a significance of casual relationships, situationships, hookups, and friends with benefits. And that's the evolution we're in right now. I don't know if that's going to be sustainable or healthy. And this is why I'm such a big proponent of human beings actually doing personal development, self-help, spiritual work at this stage of their life, so they can have the tools to actually be in a significant relationship with someone who will be there for you during the tough times.
Well, I understand your question about sustainability, but all you have to do is look at a swinger and his sustainability or her sustainability throughout their life. Like, we all like to watch a sitcom where a 30-year-old's going out and just like hooking up with whoever. And we're like, that's funny. Ha, 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 ha. It's not funny when it's an 80-year-old. Like none of us are laughing at it. Why? Because it's not sustainable, right? Because that's sad when an 80-year-old. When a 30-year-old's doing it, it's like, okay, they're just sowing their roots. They're doing their thing, which is like, I could have a whole podcast on why that's a bad thing as well, but we don't need to get into that. Yeah. But like, it's okay. Like they need to go experience this stuff. But then when it's 50 and 60 and then 70 and then 80, it starts being like, you're like, maybe you should I don't know, mature a little. Yeah. I even feel that way at 41, to be honest. Like, I mean, I'm not that old, but I definitely feel old compared to a lot of people when I go, I'm at the age now where if I go to a club, most of the kids are my kids, could be my kids.
Yeah.
So it's a different dynamic, like dancing with a 20-year-old that could be my child.
Yeah. But coming back to this thought, though, like, and I don't want to use the term promiscuity, but if you're going from one person to the next, whether you're having sex or not, it just after a while becomes exhausting, because just even think of, I believe it was Jay Shetty who said that it takes about 200 hours of face-to-face time just to build a good friendship with someone. That's a lot of time. Now, we have surface friendships, really surface relationships. And sadly, these days, a lot of people are just connecting through their devices, never even meeting, believing that they have this whole relationship with a person. That's artificial intimacy. And that's partially what's happening as well today. So, I think you might be asking, what's the solution? Like, what's the way how would I speak to a 41-year-old man who has children? And keep in mind, if you have young children, you're a role model to that young child, and you're setting a precedent on how they're going to view the world. And this is another thing that I'm very concerned about, what the young generation is having to face when it comes to romantic relationships. And I think it's sad. I look at my son who's actively dating. He'd like to have someone in his life, and he feels like it's a revolving door, and he's actually a guy who's got an old soul and has emotional maturity, but he feels like it's just a revolving door compared to when I was dating.
I feel the same way, and I'm 41.
Yeah.
So like, I can't even imagine, like, my oldest is 12, and he literally, as of the time of this recording, has his first crush ever. Oh. Right. And yeah, it's actually kind of cute. This is one of the many good reasons my kids don't listen to this podcast. Yeah, it's super cute. And it's bringing up a whole bunch of stuff I got to figure out as a parent, which I just did not. It always comes faster than you think it's gonna. Like 6 months ago, he had zero interest, and now all of a sudden it's all. I'm like, where did this come from? But I got my first crush when I was 12 too, so I get it.
Yeah, I was roughly about the same age. I think I was in 6th grade, so I'll never.
Yeah, but when we, like, either one of us, even though you're older than me, like when either one of us were 12, we didn't have a way to connect with them unless we were at school. Right.
Yeah, my crush I saw walking to school every day.
Right. Correct. Yeah. Exactly. So there might be an opportunity, at recess or at lunch or like with friends or whatever else. Now, forget social media, because, there's a lot of 12-year-olds that aren't on social media, including my son, who's not allowed on social media.
Okay, good.
But forget that. Even just texting, phone calls, any sort of communication that then can include a bunch of different people. And now all of a sudden you have this whole group, like they have their own social media, even if they're not on social media, right? And it's not as simple as just like, oh, I'm going to go like just be weird and like kind of hit her on the shoulder because at recess. Like that's what it was like when I was 12, right? Like I just shied away from her because I was ugly and I didn't have any confidence and I couldn't talk to women anyway. Yeah. So that's what happened, right? Now, it's a situation where you could find out that they like you or don't like you very quickly, and then things.
Can I tell you a quick story? Only because you're bringing this up, I have to share it. When I was 12 years old and I had a crush on Kelly, I won't say her last name, and it was her good friend had a crush on me. And so I was navigating this like I'm like, I wanted to keep distance from the friend Miranda, but I wanted to go after Kelly, but Miranda was into me and Kelly knew about, it was this whole little triangle going on. I'm 12 years old having to try to navigate this because, to this day, I still kind of wonder about that. You're
such a player, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Hey, Kelly and Miranda, if you're listening, please reach out to me directly. Exactly. And I'm going to start some drama between the two of you and Jonathan. Too bad it's not a call-in show.
Yeah.
Go ahead and give us a call right now, Kelly and Miranda, and we'll go from here.
I've tried desperately to find her on social media and I couldn't. So
there's background checks and a whole bunch of stuff. So, go on the dark web.
Yeah.
So Yeah, no, I think going back to my original question, it wasn't what's the solution as much as I would love to know the solution as a 41-year-old divorced dad myself.
Yeah.
I don't think it was what's the solution. I think it's more what you're seeing from these guys and what sort of hope or encouragement could you give them?
Great question. So one thing I have noticed, particularly in this demographic versus, I'm 60 and most men in the baby boom or tail end Gen Xers, what I'm seeing, and you're an example of this. You have a podcast, you're into personal development, you're into communication, you're into something greater than yourself. What I'm grateful to see is men are seeking help. Men are seeking resources. They're listening to podcasts. Some are listening to some dark, triad type podcast and red pill podcasts and that sort of thing. That's just perpetuating, I think, an unhealthy narrative. But those that are, seeking help and seeking, when I mean by the word help, they're seeking outlets to process their emotions, to really understand themselves, to heal if they had a childhood wound or heal from a past relationship that hurt. That's one thing I'm seeing, which I think is fantastic. And I'm hopeful that they're also being tempered, not letting their dick rule the dating process, and actually coming at it from a genuine place versus a disingenuous place. I'm seeing more of that than ever before. So those are some of the.
Do you think you're seeing more of that because of the fact that you're coaching guys that actually want help?
Well, yeah, I'm going to see what's in front of me, and that's probably you're accurate. From a statistical percentage, it's still a very low percentage of men that are seeking help. But hey, if it was, 2% 10 years ago and it's 5% now, and I'm just making them, at least it's double or more than what it used to be.
What about the guy that doesn't know how to get started? Like he doesn't want to be in that, let's call it, kind of a cynical, I give up, I'm not going to try again sort of space. When a guy like that comes to you and they finally get to the point where they're like, okay, maybe I should actually talk to somebody about this. I want to get rid of some of these limiting mindsets and these beliefs and the cynicism that I have and that sort of thing. What do you usually talk to them about first?
Well, most of the time, what brings someone to my doorstep is oftentimes a humbling event. They've had, like in my case, job loss, divorce, getting wiped out. There's a gigantic humbling event that brings them to my doorstep. And usually that's not a great place to start. It's a shitty place to start, but it's like, well, maybe the problem is not everybody else. Maybe I'm the problem. So it's that space of being able to go, okay, I can blame the feminist movement. I can blame the government. I can blame everything else. But that isn't getting me anywhere. Maybe if I look in the mirror and go, okay, how am I contributing to where I'm at in my life? It requires doing that. It requires being self-reflective and objective and looking and going, look, I'm the common denominator. When we point a finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back at us and looking at that going, it's me. Until you can say it's me, you're still going to be stuck in a vicious cycle. And ultimately the barometer is this, Josh, are you happy or not? When I use the word happy, are you at least content, joyful, delighted? Because if you're not any of those things, then the first thing to do is look at how am I the contributor to that outside of the narrative of blaming everybody else.
Well, I agree with everything you just said. Okay. I think it's key. It definitely is true for my own life. To your point, I've been on a radical self-improvement, self-development, healing, recovery path for the past, what year is it? Almost 7 years? No, 7 years now. 7 years. But before that, I wasn't at all. I liked to improve and evolve and get better and all that sort of stuff. But it was like there was so much that was hidden under the surface that I didn't even realize was hidden under the surface.
Yeah.
And for me, it really took the divorce, loss of a business, financial loss, a whole bunch of other shit that I went through for me to finally wake up and have that spiritual awakening of realizing like, my life's not where I thought it was going to be or where I wanted to be at all. And I think that's pretty common because that's a lot of guys that I talk to as well. They usually don't come to see me either until something like that happens, because everything's okay until it's not, right? Nothing's on fire until it's on fire.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for you though is, assuming that the man is not this complete egotistical, narcissistic, completely full of themselves, don't care about anybody else person, which is the majority of the population are not that guy.
Yeah.
Irregardless of what some people try to tell you on social media.
Yeah.
But most people are not that person, including, by the way, most people that are in the limelight as well, even though people love to say that, you know, whoever it is, athletes and stars and presidents and everything else, they just aren't. They aren't. If you ever talk to anybody that actually knows them, they're like, yeah, they're not. Anyway, all that being said, get off my soapbox for a second. So assuming they're not that person, assuming it's the majority of us, just normal people, and let's say that we do want to change, but we can't see what we can't see.
Yeah.
So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, yeah, I don't know if I really have this problem, but I'm not where I want to be.
Yeah.
But they still haven't connected that to maybe taking responsibility for their own life in a deeper way. We all do it in some ways, but in a deeper way. You know, I coach plenty of men, and I do this myself as well, that just, there's so many filters and the things that come out of their mouth are not what they're intending to come out at all.
Yeah.
But it ends up sounding like all women are blank, all men are blank.
Yeah.
Women always do blank, blah, 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 you know, whatever overarching thing is, right? Like, it doesn't matter. All rich people are blank. All poor people are blank. Whenever you do an ultimatum, obviously it's never true.
Yeah.
If somebody's in that cycle, but they don't realize that in their cycle, but they're not at the place they want to be, is there anything we could do to help them there? Or do we just have to sit back and just wait for them to have some huge spiritual awakening and then come seek help?
Well, there's a dilemma there's a little bit of a dilemma here, because men traditionally their identity is tied to their professional life and their wallet. So right off the bat, men are susceptible to all of the affluent based coaches and programs and narratives, your bank account has to be such, your physique has to, and they're also susceptible to the physical, those trainers and people that are hyper focused.
I mean, that's 95% of guys on social media that are trying to sell something are trying to sell 6-pack abs or a better business with more money.
So
that's it.
So when you're feeling down, you're very susceptible to that being the way to solve your problem. And I was in that camp too. I thought, the reason why, when I lost my high-end corporate job and I got wiped out, it took me almost 15 years to learn that my identity isn't tied to those two things. And I'm still just scratching the ant's belly of that, because it's such an ingrained script in us men. Women have a different script. And I'm only bringing this up as their script is usually based on physical attractiveness, and men, it's about, their wallet, so to speak. And I'm just generally speaking, but it's a relative, these are ingrained scripts in us. So you're susceptible. How are you? So one is you almost have to turn off all the noise that's triggering you to say, hey, buy my program and do this so you can heal your life and become better and all that kind of stuff. I think it has to start back at the basics. I think if you can look at your greatest fears, your insecurities, your negative patterns, your limiting beliefs in life, and look at them from an introspective place, predominantly our fears and insecurities. The problem is a lot of those fears and insecurities, it's pointing the finger at someone else is your fear and insecurity and saying, look, I'm afraid I won't be able to, make enough, look at your own fears and start from that vantage point. It's hard to do, when you see the problem as someone else. But if you can look, those would be the two places I'd start. What's my fears and insecurities? Because you're not going to focus on your joys, like those are, you have to focus on what causes pain. And really, ultimately, you have to ask yourself, what do I need? Like, what do I really need within myself? And if it's about, that's why the hyper focus on, like I'm going to pick on Andrew Tate or the red pill or all that. All they're doing is creating the fear around it. Someone else's, your problem is because of this. Instead of saying, hey, and I don't want to use the problem, I'm the source of my unhappiness. So how can I get my needs met through myself?
It's interesting you said that, and it's even more interesting to me that you use those examples as examples, because if you peel back the curtain on any of those guys, and you find out why they actually have had the success, and I'm putting that in quotes for anyone listening, not watching right now, because we all define success differently, but let's just use the American term of success, aka money and power.
Yeah.
If you look at the way that those guys got success, it wasn't from what you just said, which is fascinating, because the appearance is, we'll do all these things and, just hide from, but at the end of the day, like take Tate as an example, like the way he got success was being extremely disciplined and consistent in order to become the best in the world at his craft. That's what he did. And you could love the guy or hate the guy, but I think it's really difficult not to respect what he did in that. The fact that he got into amazing shape, the fact that he did really well in the ring, the fact that he did all these things. Now, does he spout off a lot of things I disagree with? Sure he does. But the way he got there was actually the same way all of us get there. If you're ever going to do it, it's consistency, it's discipline, and it's doing the things you need to do. Now, the interesting thing about that, though, is that he did all those things, but that's not usually his message, which is fascinating, because the message that spreads on social media isn't that. Like if I go on, and I have proved it to myself multiple times, I will post something on social media that's all about the basics of how to have more success in one area of your life. And a lot of the times, especially if it has to do with physicality, it's consistency, it's discipline, it's doing the same thing, it's showing up, right? Showing up at the gym, showing up on a walk, showing up, doing all those sort of things. People hate consistency. We all do. None of us really want to do that. At the end of the day, we all just want to goof off and, do other things. So that is never really that popular online. But if you go online and you say some extremely controversial opinion, like guys like Andrew Tate do all the time, it goes crazy. It doesn't actually benefit anybody's life. It just gets everybody mad at each other and having opinions flying back and forth. But it's not actually what brought him success. And if you don't like Andrew Tate, use somebody else as an example. I don't care, whoever it is.
Well, let me address this, and only because, not to the extent I want to defend myself, but I want to share why I have an opinion about him in particular. He's used predatory and manipulative tactics in his professional life. And also he objectifies women to some degree. And I make a stand in that realm, at least the way I perceive him in that realm. Now, why is he so disciplined? I would venture to say there's a little scared 6-year-old inside of him
100%
motivating all that. And fear can be a powerful motivator too. Let me just say this, but fear can also cripple us. And so coming back to, if you're feeling pain in your life, I invite you to look at your fears and insecurities and say, okay, how can I work through those places on an emotional level? And by the way, I give him a lot of credit from a physical standpoint. His physique, his capacity to fight in the ring, that what got him the original success he got. I just criticize the other stuff. And to the extent that there are people like him, fear is a great motivator. There's no doubt about it. It can create but I will tell you, there'll be an emotional collapse at some point in their life. Okay. It will happen. there'll be an emotional collapse somewhere down the road, because I highly doubt he built the emotional framework to compensate from
Perfect example of that is Britney Spears.
Yeah.
I mean, she was extremely talented, very consistent, very disciplined in what she did. Again, love her or hate her, doesn't matter. You can't argue with those facts that somebody does not become that popular by just like accident. It just doesn't happen. She did all that stuff. And then when she went through her trauma, it did not go well for her.
No.
And she lost it, and everybody saw it online. And then she continued that to get more validation because she wasn't getting validation the other way she wanted to. And at the end of the day, there was a scared 6-year-old behind both of those Britney Spears, the young Britney Spears and the old Britney Spears. They just showed up differently.
And she had
showed up very differently. Man, I've been in sales for almost 2 decades. And if I could tell you anything, it's that the most successful salespeople I've ever met are the most insecure.
Yeah.
Because they have something to prove, and they're going out there to try to prove their validity, to prove their worth, which is why they all have, 5 different marriages and have heart attacks and die when they're 55.
Yeah. And they oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes use manipulative tactics to get there. In some, and I'm thinking of like Jordan Belfort or someone like that.
Yeah, so they do sometimes, but I'm even talking about the ones that don't. Okay, it's still the same thing. Yeah. It's still that scared 6-year-old that's trying to prove something to himself because he didn't get love from whoever, and then he's blaming it on somebody else, and he's just trying to do it through work.
And they're seeking that dopamine hit. They're seeking the validation. They're seeking that. But the question, might be, are they really happy on the inside? Are they really feeling nurtured, taken care of? Are they nurturing it or their own self-worth through self-love, which we've been talking about? And again, I think we're in an evolution of humanity where we're now getting the opportunities through a variety of different modalities to actually go, hey, I'm the source of all my problems. I can work on that too. And that takes, and by the way, the emotional discipline to just be in integrity with yourself is one of the hardest fucking things to do. It is so hard to be in integrity with yourself, let alone someone else. And that takes real courage. That takes discipline. That takes a lot of sacrifice. Oftentimes egoic sacrifice, because it's so easy to get tapped into the superficial, needs being met and really doing the hard work. So anyway.
I agree. Yeah. Well, we could have another 3-hour long conversation and this could become the Joe Rogan podcast, but
sure.
I
want you to become the Joe Rogan podcast.
I appreciate that. I do as well. I'm not that talented yet, but I'm working on it.
Hurry up, because then I can say I knew you when.
I mean, you already could. Yeah. I'm more popular than I was a year ago. So I don't know. That being said, there's plenty of stories we didn't even get to. So maybe we'll have this conversation again sometime.
Sure,
especially including from your own life that we didn't even get to. It's like some of the traumatic stuff you went through. So maybe we'll do that at some point in the future.
Yeah.
But before we do that, you had a lot of really good things to say. I want you to just take a moment especially because you're in the dating space and you're working with, it sounds like mainly quote midlife people in that space. If somebody's listening today, what's a good way for them to get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to reach out?
Well, if you're watching this on YouTube or even listening to the audio, my name is listed right there, Jonathon Aslay. Just cut and paste that, put that in Google. That'll take you to my YouTube channel. That'll take you, and which I invite you to watch my YouTube channel. Also, it'd take you to my website, and you can follow me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the other platforms along that way. And if my content resonates with you, hit the subscribe to my email, and share it with everybody if my content resonates with you. If it don't, just be nice and don't say anything.
Do you have a preference, though? If somebody actually just wants to reach out to you, what's your preference on how they do that?
Well, to actually reach out to me directly, go to my website. There's a place with a contact info. And but if you want to get more of my content, YouTube is the best place to go.
Okay. Got it. Perfect. All right, man. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. You had a lot of wisdom and insight, and I've really appreciated this conversation. It was good stuff.
All right. Thank you. Likewise.
And also just thank you for what you do.
Oh,
We need more men out there that are turning their hurt and their pain and their trauma into good to
yeah.
help other people. We really do. And we need less of the machismo and less of the kumbaya guys.
Yeah.
And we really need some guys that are just, actually trying to help guys grow emotionally and spiritually and physically and mentally, all of it. Because I'm so tired. I'm so tired of hearing guys talk about six packs and bigger wallets.
Yeah.
I'm just so tired of it, man. It's like, they all have something to pitch. We all do. We all have something to pitch. I get it. Life is sales, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not against sales. I'm just so tired of everything else being left on the side.
No, and can I piggyback on that? Because
sure, go ahead.
I've even in my own work, I've really scaled back on the sales aspect of it, and how can I give and not make it a sales pitch, not be a download, not to be a tripwire, not to be some funnel system and all that stuff. I'm so fucking tired of what I see, popping up on my screen every day, particularly by big names too, where it's all about filling their coffers. And I'm tired of it. I'm sickened by it, and I'm grateful that there are, like, YouTube is a great resource. It doesn't cost you anything other than having to wait 5 seconds sometimes to watch an ad, But there's a lot of good people out there offering some really good advice that isn't trying to make a buck off of you. So,
and I think I'm gonna follow up on that too, just real quick before you end, in that it's not always evident, but it's evident if you just look closely enough. You can all sense the vibe on whether somebody's trying to help or not.
Yeah.
You really can. And just try to look at the motivation when you're listening to people. This is my advice to everybody watching this, is just try to figure out, like, are they actually trying to help people? If they're making money and doing business and selling at the same time, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
That's how the world goes around. But at the end of the day, is it just to stroke their own ego? Or at the end of the day, is it actually because they're trying to give back and help humanity?
You know what, though, Josh? I mean, but here's the thing. It's oftentimes wrapped in a great sales narrative,
of course,
that says that they're doing that. And yet this is why learning human behavior is almost a necessity now, because reading people is becoming increasingly hard. But we could go.
It is, but one surefire way is how much they talk about it. I mean, honestly, the more somebody talks about how much they give back and they're helping humanity and everything else, the least they probably are.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a very good barometer. I hadn't thought of that.
The wisest, most humble, and maybe you relate to this as well, guys that I've ever met are the ones that don't push forward with they're not ego first.
Yeah.
They're very strong and confident within themselves, and they're very good at what they do, but it's not about trying to convince everybody else that they're good at what they do. They just go and do what they do.
Just on a quick note, I have a new male client, or he's been with me for a little bit, but he was like, I wanted to hire you because you were so vulnerable about where you're at in your life. And I'm like, what's interesting, or where I was and where I'm still at. And I'm like, look, I'm like an hour ahead of you in the scheme of things. I'm just sharing with you what I just learned an hour ago, because we didn't even get into all the trauma and experiences I had when I lost my son, a treasured relationship, and a number of other things, even after that first collapse, is that I'm still scratching the ant's belly. And I want to talk about it because I'm just going to share with you what I just learned an hour ago, kind of thing. And my hope is it has a trickle effect. When we can really share from that sincere place of not how I succeeded, but how I'm still failing every day and still learning to succeed every day. That's where I'm at in my life. I fail and I succeed every day, and I don't even want to use the word fail and succeed. Some days I'm up, some days I'm down, but I'm objective. I want to teach self-awareness, if nothing else, is how to look at yourself as you're the audience member watching your life, and you can do it from that objective place. If I can teach that or encourage that, that's what I want most for humanity, is to be objective.
Agreed. I love it.
Thanks.
All right, y'all. Another great podcast. Again, if it resonated with you, like it, subscribe on YouTube, even if you're not watching on YouTube right now, and go check out Jonathon. And until next time, we'll see you later, you derelicts.